Hello, welcome to the fifth week of this fall 2020 semester. Today we'll be covering Chapter 5, The Ethics and Politics of Social Work Research. Principle of ethics. We'll talk about this in more detail in a few minutes, but I like, you know, the visuals that a figure like this in the first, well, actually, it's the second slide, shows um, autonomy, non maleficence, beneficence, and justice. Um, Obviously, you can see what each one means, or basically, autonomy is independent, non maleficence is, not um, avoiding or preventing any harm. Beneficence is, you're supposed to provide, your research is supposed to, or your work for that matter, social workers are supposed to benefit all and really mean all. And justice, fairness and equality to all. Not gonna go in detail um, in terms of, this is just the overview. Here's some ethical principles of research. You'll see again that some of the same issues, but a little bit more, where you have dignity, confidentiality, honesty, responsibility, competence, and integrity. And I like this figure because, you have to the left researcher and to the right participants. And you see how, privacy, it falls on the participants, and honesty it falls on researchers, and so on. But autonomy, beneficence, and not maleficence. Sort of it's in both share. A little bit of both on the side of researchers and also on participants. Okay, again, I'm not going to necessarily um, keep, we'll continue reading, the slides. You can do that on your own. But basically, um, as a starting point, about in World War II, Germany, Hitler, the Nazis, conducted many very, it, I don't think unethical covers it. It's more like inhumane, dangerous, many other words, even probably worse than that. They conducted experiment with Jewish people and other people that they consider to be lesser than maybe gypsies and gay, lesbian. Not sure what else is in the list, but you know, um, uh, I mean, in terms of Germany in the 1940s, they conducted experiment freezing temperature. What you would, yes, they froze people. They conducted an experiment on malaria, and yes, they infected people with malaria. They experimented with sterilization, uh, concussions, uh, hitting a person. I mean, you can argue, well, the person was wearing a helmet because it was supposed to be like a pilot or something like that, and but still, it's they wanted to make it realistic, but literally way too realistic. And instead of, not that animal testing is ethical, but human testing that the person would be killed or brain damage, etc. That's obviously not very ethical. Um, Let me just go to this timeline, um, which is interesting because, the Tuskegee syphilis study actually began before World War II. Um, yes. Um, and I'll talk a little bit more about it. Um, Probably, I see, yes, the next slide. But let's talk about during World War II. And, after World War II, because of many of those atrocities conducted by the Nazis, let me back up. Well, yeah, no, I'm right, because I was going to talk about the Nuremberg trials. And those were the trials that, um, Nazis, specifically one, the doctor who was responsible for many of those, was tried in the Nuremberg trial. And from that trial, the Nuremberg Code was created, and the the Nuremberg Code was, an attempt to sort of prevent many of the inhumanities and created by the Nazis during the World War II. Um, uh, I won't go in a lot of detail, but yeah, they may have prevented, that sort of atrocities, but to call them lesser atrocities, but um, they were still being done or happening. Um, just to follow the timeline. So, and since our next slide is going to talk about the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, who started in 1932 and ended in 1972. If you do the math, that's 40 years. And yes, they infected uh, male African Americans with syphilis. And one thing that is not listed here is when penicillin was discovered, they weren't even that wasn't available for this, um, you know, um, people really, and that made a bad thing even worse. But I'll talk about more of that in a minute. Then, the other most important thing here, not that the other um, events were not important, but the Belmont report, which was here in the U.S. in the 1970s. Well, here in this timetable timeline is listed as in 1979, and thanks to that, some of the things that happened because of the Belmont report um, was the creation of IRBs, which is the institutional review boards that we'll talk about, a little later. So to prevent, things that were problematic or unethical from happening. So let's go into a deeper dive into the U.S. Tuskegee syphilis experiment. Um, I don't have it here, but there's a lot of there. In fact, there was a movie made, but obviously that takes too long to show it. There's shorter, pieces of documentaries that have been done. So you're welcome to search those. Um, so it was supposed to, be a public health service. It's a type of experiment. There is a connection to the military, but I'll leave that for later. Well, actually, I won't discuss that. Um, so, basically, unbeknown to them, they were infected. This were not only African American men, but from rural areas, more like very likely to be uneducated. So people they were taking advantage of. They were not tell the whole truth. In fact, like just said, even in 1945, when penicillin was approved, they weren't allowed, and since they were not really told, they kept living their lives, and may con, they may have passed the disease to their spouses and so on, and so needless to say, when we talk about justice and equality, well, you can see how people are not being informed and not taken care of, and exposing to real dangers, right? Not just oh, somebody may get upset, or these are you know quite severe circumstances. And there's been other uh, experiments done by in or outside, but by the U.S. that I've experimented also on sterilization and others. But I won't get to those. You know, Here I have a list of experiments by the Nazis. I tend not to open them in class. They're they're quite severe in consequence of the experiments on twins. You know, it's a terrible thing. To probably one of them or both of them. Well, one was given. It's more like a torture, if you want to know, and to see the effects on the other one. They're horrible experiments. So you are on your own if you want to really examine it. Explore them. The Nuremberg Code. Well, you can read. Um, just the code, which is all of those 10 statements. Voluntary human consent is essential. That's why we have the we let our potential subjects know what they're enter the experiment voluntary, and inform, and minimum risk, if any, by the way. They can leave anytime, and you can see the list. There's where other instances, just for these are some of, or this one is well known, the Sally Domin disaster. It was a sleeping pill, but it made when pregnant women took this sleeping medicine, their babies were born deformed and all of terrible. The Declaration of Helsinki, if we go back to the timetable, that was 1964, right? And this one, and then the Belmont Report in 1979, which there are three aspects or core aspects are respect for person, beneficence, and justice. Um, one of the ways to respect the person is to, have an institutional review board in universities and other agencies, and make sure that all of the laws are followed. That there's a committee meeting, a board of a number of in our case, JSU faculty and maybe other administrative uh, uh, personnel, um, who decide, if something, it's not, it's okay to be conducted in terms of an experiment. So, this is the sort of the flow, you know, so you can complete the application, submit it. If it's denied, you make these changes, and then if it's approved, then you can perform uh, your experiment. Um, yes, so um, the subjects should only participate voluntarily. Um, and this is sort of in order, share results with participants, good presentation, purpose and importance, use short and brief data collection tool, because you don't want to have them for hours and hours and inconvenience them, and at the last, awarding for participants, that may be, not necessarily controversial, but people get sort of paid all the time to participate. Um, but that also costs us as researchers money, which we may or may not have. Some of the more common things, probably because of the lack of resources, a lot of time you just raffle a gift certificate of whatever amount, $25, $50 among some of the participants. But sometimes you have 10 participants, and it's not necessarily that expensive to give each one, if you only have 10. But imagine if you had more than that, then you can say, I'm sure you receive those kind of surveys by email, saying, you have a chance of winning, whatever, $100, or, I mean, probably not in the academic sense. Well, actually, sometimes even in academic, because they're only, raffling a few. So, informed consent is what, it's a letter most of the time, or some type of communication that the subject sign, and there's you explain all of the different things listed in this figure: nature of treatment, alternative, benefit, opportunity for questions, risk. um Excuse me. um I don't know that there's much uh that I can add. um Everything is basically spelled out here in this slide. I'll let you read it. Um, Again, participation is voluntary. Um, Sometimes, um, there are exceptions to the voluntary. I would think, especially when you want a specific sample, and you can, what to do. Well, um, it's hard because that may be so specific. I don't have a good example. I never really conducted any research that would have exceptions. It have always been voluntary, and so just know that it is possible to be voluntary, maybe in quotes, so not so much, but um, um, I suppose. Well, actually, I suppose that when you give people a placebo and it's for, I don't know, cancer treatment, the people receiving the placebo are not told, but they're thinking that they may be receiving, um, a cure for their illness. And anyway, I think that might be a situation because, is, necessary. You're not making it, well, supposedly you're not making it worse, um, the condition, uh, and then because it will benefit uh, quite a large population, if, by doing it this way. And I guess I'm assuming that, if it works, those people who were in the control, who didn't get the placebo, could actually get the actual medicine. That would be my assumption. Uh, what do I, looks like, oh, I think I have the same um, slide twice. So no harm to the participants. That should be, obvious, and that includes psychological harm. And your IB must be persuaded that a small amount of risk far outweighs the benefit to be gained by the study, which is what I was talking about before. Anonymity and confidentiality. Anonymity is that nobody knows who you are, and confidentiality means that they won't publish or announce, you know, that you participated or said this or said that, and so on. Yeah, so there's a difference between anonymous and confidential. You know, technically, everything anonymous should be confidential, but not everything confidential uh, is anonymous. Um, because let's say that somebody comes to you as a client. Well, you respect his or her confidentiality, but he or she is not confidential, because you have it in front of her. You are in front of her. You're the client. So now, if your client was behind some sort of screen you couldn't see, and then fictitious name or a number, and even you get one of those things that distort the voice, then it could be anonymous, and hopefully confidential. Me also that you not later know who patient 10 was, or deceiving patients. That's obviously part of the being respecting the person. um, if you tell them, if you're going to give placebo and the real thing, you at least let them know, well, we don't usually do that. We don't give medicines, but just because it's easy to sort of explain this way, um, um, the person in the sample know that they may be receiving a placebo, but they also may be receiving the real thing. So, they're not being fooled, like, for instance, or lied to, like the Tuskegee experiment and some other experiment that people were actually lied to. Um, the analysis and reporting, um, uh, they it should be uh, public. Everything should be for the purpose of you know, betterment of humanity, the beneficence, right? So um, it's not supposed to keep, um, store in a lock box. It's supposed to be shared. Um, Rating of benefits and costs. You can also, um, you know, just read this slide. I usually what I do is, add some more uh, little drop of wisdom, but I'm not here to read the slides. Okay, so I'm 5 minutes after my 20 minutes. Um, let's see. I think you can just keep reading, and I'm about the end. You know, see. Um, so some of that human subject training that I'm having you all do is it will give you the insights of what knowledge you should have to be able to conduct and be allowed to conduct human subject um, research. Now, you're just taking the kind of the basic uh, training. There are some special populations that you may need if you're going to conduct research on those, such as people in prison, children, which obviously you would need besides training and the certification, but also an adult have to be sign and maybe even be present. People with some cognitive or developmental you know problems and so on. You may be special circumstances. um, I'm not gonna, yeah, I can keep on going. I'm not gonna do that. The other thing, or one of the last thing, these are mostly, if I keep going, experiment. Last thing I'm gonna say is justice. That's because you want to be, equality, and you want to not only have enough people representing um, in terms of gender. Sometimes the experiment can be all males because of whatever the reason are, but allow enough people of all different races, socioeconomic, um, religious, etc. Because if the results are intended to benefit everybody, shouldn't everybody be part of the sample? So um, we're not doing this research just for a certain well, we are because we, in the sense of we try to, social workers, give that voice to the underrepresented, but and that's part of because in research the underrepresented and underserved have been avoided by a lot of research and researchers. Um, so, that's part of the justice that, not only, some people with privileges get to benefit from the research, everybody should. And with that, I'm going to end, so I'll keep it less than half an hour. Please go over these slides, and don't forget to read the book. And let's see, some of this you may want to Google it. In fact, this one, there's a movie, maybe on Netflix, and the other one that I did not um, mention is the Stanford Experiment, which is also a movie. They made a movie plus their documentaries. So please feel free to do that. And if you have any questions, we'll, you can contact me. So uh, keep being safe, keep being healthy. Wash your hands, wear a mask, keep your loved ones safe, and I'll see you or talk to you soon. Bye bye.